was called the world's first pregnant man, and today he gave birth.
But the court has gone the whole way, said there is an absolute constitutional right to same-sex marriage.
Hurricane Harvey is pelting the Texas coastline.
There is an increasing attack on freedom of religion, speech, and conscience.
Welcome to the Issachar Hour, examining law, policy, and culture through the lens of the Judeo-Christian worldview to help you understand the times and know what you ought to do.
Good day, good evening, good night, whatever part of the world you are in. Welcome to the Issachar Hour. My name is Wayne West, and this is my wife, Doreen. How are you?
Good day to all our listeners on the Issachar Hour. One of my patients complained that my name is Dr. Brady West, and she did not see that on the show. So just to clear it up for that patient, that I do use both names interchangeably. It's very good to be here, and welcome to all our viewers. And I want to say thank you to those who have given us feedback about the show. We appreciate it, and we look forward to your further feedback, your further questions, and your further suggestions about topics that you would like us to cover on the show.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today we'll be talking, our topic is live not by lies. Interesting, live not by lies. And we are going to go from the present to a bit in the past and to the future during the show. Live not by lies. And as the show progresses, you will see why the topic is relevant to us in our world today.
So you're going to tell us about the book now, or should we wait a little while?
I'm going to say very briefly about the book. That the book was written just this year by a gentleman named Rob Dreher, Live Not by Lies. And the title of the book is based on a speech, an essay, written by a man called Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who was a Russian, who many of our viewers may not even be aware of.
Yeah.
But very critical. He was somewhat of a prophet. And Alexander Solzhenitsyn used this topic for a talk, an address he gave when he was being exiled from his birth, from the land of his birth. And so Dreher picks up on this theme to give us this book, which is a kind of warning for us in our day. Live not by lies.
So why would he write a book like this? And what's happening in our day? Aren't we free as the birds and so on?
Well, hopefully, as the show progresses, our viewers will see why I think this book is quite necessary in our time. And we are going to begin with a video that will explain it very well as to why we need a book like this.
So we want you, the listeners, to see why it is important to have written a book like this in our time. So we're going to take a look at the very first video.
Who is asking us to live by lies? And what are the lies by which they're asking us to live? Yeah. So let's look at the first video, which is about a doctor, which is relevant for us.
A doctor in the UK.
Doctor in the great land of the United Kingdom, our motherland, called Dr. David Makareth. He's a Christian, and you could say he's a dissident. So the title of the book, Live Not by Lies, it's called a handbook for Christian dissidents.
For Christian dissidents.
That's what the subtitle is.
We, during the course of this show, will be preparing you to be a dissident, because there are persons who are seeking to force us as Christians to live by lies. So let's take a look at Dr. Makareth's experience.
Christian dissident, Dr. David Makareth. Live not by lies.
I've said, shocked by the outcome of my case and disappointed, but we can see the lie of the land. We know this is a battle that we have to fight. We will be appealing. I will be appealing, and my legal team will be supporting me. I'm determined to go forward. I'm determined to take this everywhere it can possibly go, but we must stand up for freedom, for the gospel of Jesus Christ. And as a Christian doctor, I believe it makes me a better doctor to be a Christian and a doctor, and I need freedom of conscience in order to practice medicine. In essence, I'm now being compelled to say things which I cannot say. And the question of compelled speech is relevant to every single person in this country, not just to myself. It's not just we've lost our freedom of speech. That's bad enough. But now we are absolutely compelled because of this need to have a belief in transgenderism, because of this lack of belief in the Bible's reference to human dignity, we are compelled now to use language in a way which has been prescribed for us by other parties with whom we disagree. The issue here is that we're being told, first of all, we're being told that people can change sex. And that's not true. They can't change sex. It's impossible. And if anybody in the medical profession is watching this, you prove it if you think I'm wrong. I know you can't. But we're being told to live and practice a lie. It is a lie. We're not, I think, Andrew Williams, the head of Christian Concern here, has pointed out again and again, we are not helping people when we practice a lie. We cannot ever help people by practicing a lie. So it's not that we don't care about people, we do care about people. And it's not that we don't want to help people. There's been said in the press, for example, that I wouldn't treat certain people. There's never been a patient I've refused to treat or would refuse to treat. But when I'm told to call a man a woman or call a woman a man, they're pushing my conscience where it cannot go, because I could not serve my Saviour, the Lord Jesus Christ, and do that. But at the same time, it's beyond reason to me, and beyond logic, and beyond science to do such a thing. And that's not good medicine.
So that was a brief introduction to this Christian dissident, Dr. David Makareth, who has been a doctor for over 3 decades. He worked in the British health system, and he was working as a disability assessor. That means that when persons had disability, he would assess them as to the degree of the disability and what compensation they would deserve and so on. But he worked for a department called the Department of Work and Pensions in the UK. And they tried to introduce this transgender ideology there.
They tried to introduce it, or they introduced it? Well,
I would say they planned to introduce this transgender ideology there. But Dr. David Makareth, who is a Christian, he said he would not be willing or able to call a 6-foot-tall bearded man madam. So evidently there were men who were 6 foot tall and bearded who demanded to be called madam.
In the present ethos of the world, and for the elite of the world, the people in the United Nations and so on, and the universities, a man could identify as a woman. So I can call myself a woman and demand that you address me as señorita. So he wasn't doing any of that.
So Dr. David Makareth said he would not call a bearded man madam.
Okay.
Because of this, he had to appear before a tribunal because he was going to lose his job for not being able to do this.
So if he didn't call someone like myself señorita,
he could not work
he was going to be fired.
Disability assessor.
Okay.
So
was that a lie?
Before the tribunal in Birmingham, the tribunal said that the biblical view of male and female that Dr. Makareth held to was incompatible with human dignity.
Okay, so the Bible said God made male and female created he them. And according to this new worldview, this new philosophy, this new way of thinking, this new basis for law and public policy, it is incompatible with human dignity, according to them.
And therefore, he did lose his job.
He lost it. He was fired.
He was fired. And he lost his appeal too.
Yeah.
He appealed it. His appeal against dismissal. And the appeal was itself dismissed.
So he's out of work.
So he's not working now in that job. And Dr. Makareth said that the tribunal that dismissed him breached his right to freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, and freedom of religion. So here we have two competing claims. The tribunal claiming that his beliefs, that they are male and female, people are made that way, is contrary to, incompatible with human dignity, and therefore not deserving of any right to employment.
So they fired him.
Out.
So people who hold the view that persons are male and female in the UK at the moment
do not deserve to be heard,
to work, or to be employed. They were going to be fired.
And
is it true that males and females are not the only way that human beings, or is that a lie?
Well, that is something that our viewers must start to think about. Is that a lie? So Dr. Makareth was defended by a group called Christian Concern.
Yeah.
It's a legal group in the UK that has a lot of work nowadays because there are a lot of Christians who are being dismissed for being Christians.
Well,
or
because
arrested for being Christians.
Because the whole truths, male and female, are biological realities.
Or they try to preach the gospel on the streets and they are arrested. And
Another
so
thing,
Christian
yeah.
Concern is very busy, and we know the head of Christian Concern very well, Andrea. She's a friend of ours and a colleague and a fellow fighter. And Christian Concern defended Dr. Makareth. And when they lost the appeal, Andrea Williams of Christian Concern said, and this I want our viewers to hear the statement that she made. She said, for the first time in the history of English law, for the first time in the history of English law, a judge, whose duty is to interpret the law, a judge has ruled that free citizens must engage in compelled speech. Now, I put it to you that...
Let me see if I can say that. Let me see if I can read that and understand it. She said, for the first time in the history of English law, a judge has ruled that free citizens must engage in compelled speech. Explain that to me.
So,
explain that to me. What you mean by that?
Well, I think there's an inherent anomaly in the sentence, because a citizen who must say what a judge tells them to say is not free. And so I think what she ought to have said is that no, the way English law is operating now, Britain is no longer a free society. And British citizens are no longer free. I think that is what it means.
So if the judge could say that you must call a man who says he's a woman, señorita or señor or madam or whatever you say, then he could also say that 1 + 1 is 3.
Well,
couldn't they compel you to say that 1 + 1 is 6?
So that would be a mathematical lie, I suppose.
But if you're going to lie about biology, why you can't lie about mathematics?
No reason at all, because they are both rooted in reality.
Yeah.
You could equally lie about one as the other.
Yeah.
So Britain is no longer a free society, and British citizens are no longer free. If they must say what somebody tells them to say, they are no longer free.
So would you say that's authoritarianism or totalitarianism?
Well, first of all, I would say that to give the viewers a hint of what we'll be going to shortly, you could say that whereas in the old systems of repression and so on, you would have like a camp, you'd have a labor camp. In Russia, they would be called gulags, labor camps, where persons who don't conform are sent there. They are physically sent there to die or to suffer or to be tortured or whatever. In those camps, to correct their way of thinking.
Yes. Re-education, I think they call it.
But no, in our time, you can say that Dr. Makareth has been sent to a gulag of his home because he has to stay at his home. He cannot go out to work. He cannot earn a living. And so he's been sent to his private gulag.
Here you have a man who is trained in medicine.
Worked for decades.
Has been a doctor for 30-something years. As far as we know, he had no problem. But because he would not say, he's not willing to speak the language that the totalitarians in the British judicial system are demanding, he is fired.
And he said he's not entitled to any rights because his views are incompatible with human dignity.
Because human dignity is now based on human desire. So whatever you desire to be, that is what people must recognize you as.
So it begs the question then of whether modern day England is now a totalitarian
state. It is a totalitarian state, and we're going to show you why it is a totalitarian state. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are listening to us, we're going to show you the difference between authoritarianism and totalitarianism, and you will see that modern day Britain is a totalitarian state. Specifically, it is a secular LGBT totalitarian state. So
should we look at that then? The difference between authoritarian, which most persons would think is the same thing, as totalitarian. We're going to show you how they differ. Okay, so let's look at that.
Hey there! Welcome to this Mometrics video on totalitarianism versus authoritarianism. We understand that distinguishing the two can be a little confusing. I want to try and help clear things up for you. Today, I will define totalitarianism and authoritarianism, then we will put them up against each other so we are able to see the difference more clearly. Let's start off by defining the two. First, authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is marked by submission to authority. It is the opposite of individualism and democracy. In an authoritarian government system, the political power is condensed into one authority figure or figures. Generally, they assume power and are not elected by the people. Their power is unrestrained and they answer to no one. Now, on to totalitarianism. A totalitarian government system is where the one in power or the ones in power see no limitation to their authority and seek to control every aspect of the public and private life in any way possible. So now let's compare the two. What's the difference between totalitarianism and authoritarianism? Okay, so totalitarianism is authoritarianism, and then some. In an authoritarian system, there are a few social and economical institutes that are outside of the government's control. So the authoritarian system wants full political power, but do not go beyond that. The totalitarian rule system, on the other hand, want power over everything. Everything. They seek power beyond governmental rule and begin to intrude into the ideology of everyone under their rule. One of the most familiar examples of a totalitarian rule was Adolf Hitler. He went beyond political rule and sought control over what people believed and even what race he thought that they should be. Another key difference is in the way that they execute their ruling. The authoritarian ruler is more focused on individual power, while the totalitarian ruler is more of a charming ideologist who claims to have the best interests of the people or the state in mind. I hope this was helpful in distinguishing the difference. Be sure to check out our other videos for any of your study questions. Until next time.
So in the previous video, we were told, I think a very good exposition on the difference between authoritarianism and totalitarianism. So authoritarianism refers to control of a political system. For example, a setting in which everyone has to vote for a particular party. Only one party is going to be in power. That could be an authoritarian system, but you're still
and
free.
That party could be right or left.
That's right.
But it imposes that political view, and it's the only political view allowed to exist. That's authoritarian.
But totalitarianism goes beyond that, to not only about politics, but about anthropology, the nature of the human person, about religion, what church you can go to, if you can go to church, what religion you can have, how you think, what you speak, all of those things. So countries like Russia during the Stalinist era, were totalitarian in that they were authoritarian. You can only have one political system,
but
and you have to conform.
To that, yes.
Your thinking had to conform.
So in the video they were saying that totalitarian rule extends beyond mere authoritarian to where there is an ideology. I think this is the operative word. Not just a political view, but an ideology that imposes itself
on every aspect of life.
Every aspect of life. Displaces all prior traditions and institutions and has one goal. And this goal is that all aspects of society must be brought under that ideology. That's the essence.
So what we're witnessing in the UK with this doctor is it's totalitarian, but confined to a particular area, because the British are not saying you can only vote for this political party, or that you cannot have this particular religion. You could be Muslim or whatever. But when it comes to a certain sphere of life, you are not allowed to think other than the way in which the elite and the authority of the society. So it's a kind of totalitarianism.
Some people say it's a kind of soft.
So it's a soft totalitarianism. And the soft totalitarianism we are witnessing there pertains to human identity, human sexuality, LGBT. So what started as the gay rights movement in places like the United States have now become a soft totalitarianism about everything pertaining to human beings and human sexuality. Now, totalitarianism has a way of operating that results eventually in punishing and killing people.
Well, yes.
That's the nature of that is our experience with totalitarian. So what the doctor experienced was he lost his job.
And if his job was the only way he could live, he would eventually die because he couldn't earn a living.
So soft or hard, it ends up killing people. Now let us take a look at some hard totalitarianism and what may well be the future of this so-called soft totalitarianism. What were you going to say about live not by lies?
Well, first of all, as I said in my introduction, the topic "Live Not by Lies" was a topic of an address given by a man called Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Yeah.
So who was he? Well, Alexander Solzhenitsyn was a communist initially, held to the communist worldview, way of life.
And
he was a
for those who don't know, because many young people nowadays don't know things like communism, because communism has something of the past. It's a way of saying that you cannot own private property. Everything you own belongs to the state. Anything pertaining to the means of production, of producing anything, belongs to the state. You cannot own it. Only the state can own business, in other words. And that was one of the major objectives of communism, because if the state controlled all the ways of earning income, it can then distribute that income to whoever it wishes and however it wishes.
Yes, but although the heart of it is economics, it extended beyond economics too. Because it meant you couldn't hold private religious views. You couldn't decide to go to church if you wanted. Church was under the control of the Communist Party as well. And the universities were under the control of the Communist Party.
So it was totalitarian.
It was totalitarian. You could only teach there if you held to those views. And if you did not, you'd be arrested and sent to the Gulag, like Dr. Makareth being sent to the British Gulag. And so Alexander Solzhenitsyn was formerly a communist. He actually served in the army, the communist army.
Yes, he became a captain of the artillery, one of the artillery units during World War II.
Exactly. And so he held to this view that, communism was this wonderfully progressive thing, that it was equality, it was harmony, it was beautiful, it was to be contrasted with the greed of the West and how the West was decadent and all of this. He held to that. And then in his travels around Russia.
So that was the propaganda of the Communist Party of Russia, particularly under Stalin.
Which was equality and harmony, and everybody being equal. Everybody owning the means of production, and taking away the greed of the Western world and the decadence.
Everybody got what they needed.
Everybody got what they needed. Every man enough, no man too much.
That's right. That's
kind of nice sounding thing.
Yeah, these things always sound nice on paper,
Enough for every man, too much for no man.
Yeah.
And so he believed this at first.
Yeah.
But then in his travels around Russia, he realized that what was said about this great myth of progress under communism was a lie.
It was a lie. He was able to see with his own eyes
it was a lie.
Fact that the people of the Soviet Union, because at that time it was the Soviet Union,
were not living under harmony and peace and equality.
They were having a very hard and desperate life.
And in fact, Solzhenitsyn said that in Russia, communism was revealing itself to be a dead dog. Whereas in the West, the people in the West, with their idealistic views, still thought it was a roaring lion. But in Russia, it was being revealed to be a dead dog. So anyway, he became a dissident. What is a dissident? A dissident is someone who refuses to live by the lie of the day.
Yeah, he wrote a couple letters, I think, against Stalin.
Who told him, right?
And remember, in an authoritarian state, you can't have a different political view.
You cannot.
And in a totalitarian state, you not only can have a different political view, you can't even have different political thoughts.
You cannot even think it. Exactly.
Or write it.
Or write it. Or say it. That's why poor Dr. Makareth realized, right?
Yeah,
and so,
in totalitarian Britain,
as a result of his dissidence, his refusal to live by that lie, that communism was a great thing and it was beautiful and wonderful.
That's right.
And his willingness to say it. It's one thing not to believe the lie, but it's another thing to say it is a lie, and then it's a third thing to refuse to conform to the lie.
That's right.
Those are three steps, right? You don't believe the lie, you say it is a lie, and then you say, I am going to live as if this lie is a lie. I will not live by the lie. And so Solzhenitsyn went through all three of those stages. And he was sent to the Gulag himself.
The Gulag is like slavery, except that
well, I think it's worse.
You are supposed to be a free person. That's all.
Well, he was sent to the Gulag
for re-education.
Yes, and for re-education, for correction, right?
And it was a prison with hard labor.
Yeah, and then subsequently he was released from the Gulag.
Yeah.
And then ultimately in 1974, on February 12th, he was exiled from Russia. And it's on the eve of his exile that he published this letter or this speech entitled Live Not by Lies. So just to explain to our listeners what a Gulag was back then. The Gulag was a labor camp, forced labor. For the purposes of correction.
You're in prison and you have to work like a dog.
So these labor camps existed for about maybe 30 years in Russia.
Yeah, maybe about 40 years under Stalin.
Throughout the time of the Second World War and into the 50s.
Stalin,
And actually the word Gulag is an acronym for the Russian, is a Russian acronym for the Chief Administration of Corrective Labor Camps. So these places were corrective.
One of the things I love about these people, is that they always have really nice names. But in fact, like I always say, if you hear something called the People's Republic,
it is not the people's.
It's a totalitarian state where the people have no say.
Exactly.
So so when they say things, let me hear the name again.
Gulag is the Russian, the first letters of the Russian words.
It's an acronym.
Stand for Chief Administration of Corrective Labor Camps.
So you would think that is a place that is nice and it's just corrective.
However, yes, but
it's
actually
a prison with hard labor
for correction
and abuse.
Right. So the population, some social scientists and researchers estimate that in 1936 the population of the Gulags was estimated about 5 million.
5 million.
And about 1.2 to 1.7 million persons died in the Gulag.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember reading the books, because there were I think a trilogy Solzhenitsyn wrote called the Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah.
I remember reading that book when I was in high school and being quite struck by it.
Well, I remember seeing it, but it was such a big book I decided I shouldn't read it. Right. I would hear about it.
It was in 3 parts.
So I found out about it.
Persons who were sent to the Gulags were, and there were a chain of them, so that's why it's called Archipelago. It's a chain of Gulag. Right? And the prisoners of war were sent there, traitors, so-called traitors, to the status quo.
Those who didn't agree with what the people at the top.
Dissidents like Solzhenitsyn and many others, and criminals. Common criminals were also sent there. And so this is what happened to Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He was a dissident in Russia and he was sent to the Gulag. So I think we are now going to talk about why conformity had to be enforced.
Yes.
In other words, why not just leave persons and say, okay, we believe this, but if you don't believe that, it's okay. If you think some people can own private property, that's fine, we'll allow you to. But those who don't want to own private property, they will all join a communal ownership and they will operate that way. And those who don't want to be in that system can still own their private property. Why conformity had to be enforced?
It is in the nature of totalitarianism that it considers itself right, first of all. It considers itself as having the best option for the community. And it considers every other option to be evil.
And it does not suffer any disagreement.
And it doesn't suffer disagreement. So this is why Alexander Solzhenitsyn, did I pronounce it properly, had to be sent to the Gulag. Let us take a little bit look at what he actually experienced and what was happening in Russia at that time. This video that is coming up starts with a very interesting statement. He says, the lie was so thick you couldn't see the pillars. I think I'm paraphrasing. But what he's saying, fundamental to that system
is a lie.
We are being asked to live by many, many, many lies these days. And once you are being asked to live by a lie, the people who are asked you to live by a lie will suppress your freedom of speech, and your freedom of thought, and send you to, what's the name of the place?
The Gulag. Chief Administration of Corrective Labor Camp.
So let's take a look at this video to see how
conformity was enforced.
It came about in the Soviet
Union.
And the lie has, in fact, led us so far away from a normal society that you cannot even orient yourself any longer. In its dense grey fog, not even one pillar can be seen. These words were penned by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the Russian author most famous for his book, The Gulag Archipelago, which provides a harrowing account of the Soviet prison system and Soviet society in general during the country's great communist experiment of the 20th century. Solzhenitsyn spent nearly a decade in prison camps for criticizing Stalin in a series of letters he wrote to a friend while he was fighting for the Soviet Red Army during World War II. During his time in the gulags, Solzhenitsyn experienced firsthand both the heights that people could reach and the depths into which they could fall during times of severe crisis. In this video, we are going to examine some of his fascinating insights on communism, the nature of evil, the importance of speaking the truth, and the ability to affirm life even in the face of great suffering. Early in Solzhenitsyn's life, like most Russian youth, he was a firm believer in communism. However, these views began to change during World War II, as his travels across Russia with the Red Army allowed him to see firsthand how poorly his fellow Russians were living, and how brutally they were treated by Stalin and the Soviet regime. But while his time in the Red Army certainly jaded his views of communism, it was the time he spent in the gulags that turned him into one of the world's harshest critics of this ideology. In 1977, at a talk given in Vermont, where he was living after a failed assassination attempt on him by the KGB, followed by his banishment from Russia, Solzhenitsyn had this to say about communism. The communist system is a disease, a plague that has been spreading across the earth for many years already, and it is impossible to predict what peoples will yet be forced to experience this disease firsthand. My people, the Russians, have been suffering from it for 60 years already. They long to be healed. However, Solzhenitsyn understood that one's perception of communism is often far different if one is forced to experience it firsthand, versus merely dreaming and theorizing about it from the relative comfort of a non-socialist country. For us in Russia, he said, communism is a dead dog, while for many people in the West, it is still a living lion. One of the purposes of the Gulag Archipelago was to reveal to the world the true horrors which occurred as the Soviet Union tried to transform itself into a society organized under communist principles. While many advocates of communism and other variants of socialism like to speak about how great a society would be if the tenets of socialism were adhered to, often overlooked is the fact that many people do not share in their vision and have no interest in handing over their property to the collective, and therefore, as occurred in Russia, force must be used against any who resist the great societal transformation.
So, as that video showed, here was Alexander Solzhenitsyn living his life as somebody who loved communism, was exposed to it, believed in it, but then suddenly was awakened to its reality as a thing from the propaganda and the lies that were being told about it, decided to do something about it, ended up in the Gulag Archipelago. And why now did he have to be there? Because of the fact that he was speaking truth to a situation in which the lie was mandatory. Lie was mandatory. And whenever you have that, the people who speak truth are going to be punished, persecuted. So the Soviet Union now, as we said, it was a communist system. It intended to use to create an environment, create an economic order where no one owned private property. All the means of production were owned by the state, and the outcomes of those things were distributed by the state to people as they needed.
But what was the lie? What was the lie?
Naturally,
the lie was that this was the best system,
and that it was working.
Right.
Naturally, in any system, there'll be people who don't agree with what the authorities want. And there were people in Russia who were farmers who owned their own farms, and they would sell their produce and so on and so forth. So in order to set up the system that the Soviets wanted, Stalin had to get rid of those people, get rid of their farms, and bring them under the Soviet state. Because it was more than Russia, it was the Soviet Union at the time. So, as
why
we shall
was conformity
see,
enforced? Because the lie cannot bear truth.
Yeah.
Because wherever the lie is what operates, truth is poisonous to it.
Absolutely.
And cannot be permitted to coexist.
Absolutely. The propaganda that Stalin and they were saying is that that's Russian system, that Soviet system, that communist system was ideal and everybody was happy. And when Solzhenitsyn went and saw it, it wasn't so at all.
And if he said it wasn't so, then he couldn't be allowed.
But the thing is, what did he see? What he saw is what is coming up in the next video. He saw that in order to achieve their objectives, the Soviet government had to take away property from the farmers.
Yeah.
And not only did they take away property from the farmers, they actually allowed millions of those farmers to die.
Yes.
So take a look at it. This is how
the lie operates.
How it operates.
And what it must do to truth to keep operating.
If we live by lies, this is what is going to happen. The people
if we speak truth.
If we speak truth.
You mustn't say this is what's going to happen. This is what is going to happen to us if we insist on speaking.
But actually, not only
but those who live by the lies suffered too.
That's right, because some of those farmers who were there, they were not like Solzhenitsyn and Pathologist.
Right.
They were simply in the way of what the Soviets wanted.
Right.
So
they were not dissidents in the terms of being outright dissidents, but their very lifestyle denied the lie.
So it brings us to the point, a lot of people in church feel that if they keep quiet, everything will be okay.
Away. Right.
Now, if you talk, you might end up like Solzhenitsyn.
If you talk, you'll be the first to go.
If you talk, you might be like Solzhenitsyn, you might end up in the Gulag.
Right.
But those who keep quiet didn't end up in the Gulag, A lot of them actually died because in order to do what they wanted to do, the Soviet government
could not allow them to exist.
Couldn't allow them.
Their very existence showed the lie to be a lie.
Absolutely.
If you said common ownership is the perfect way to go, and these people had their own farms and yet were living good lives and were able to prosper, it would be showing that the lie is a lie. And so sometimes your very existence reveals the lie to be a lie, and therefore you cannot be allowed to exist.
That's a very important point, because like I say, a lot of people in church believe that they can stay quiet and coexist with the lies that are being told nowadays. It will not happen. Your very existence as church is not going to be allowed. It cannot be allowed.
It shows the lie to be a lie.
Because it shows up the lie. And
so a warning is necessary.
So take a look at what happened to the people.
They're called the Kulaks.
The Kulaks who resisted the lie of the Soviets.
Who by their very existence resisted the lie.
And they didn't write any letters like Solzhenitsyn.
No, but they still suffered.
Because of their existence.
They could not be allowed to exist.
All right. Let's take a look at it.
The Great Societal Transformation. The most important principle of communism and socialism in general, the one around which much of its theory is built, is that the means of production should be owned in a collective or public manner, in contrast to under capitalism, where the means of production are privately owned. To accomplish this, the Soviet leaders confiscated the property of farmers and other business owners, and the class of Russians who bore the greatest brunt of this process were the Russian peasants known as the kulaks. The kulaks were the owners of small farms, and the Soviet government instituted a program known as dekulakization to rid these people of their property. Solzhenitsyn spent considerable time in Volume 3 of the Gulag Archipelago explaining and documenting the reality of this process. If a man had a brick house and a row of log cabins, or 2 stories in a row of 1-story houses, there was your kulak. Get ready, you bastard, you got 60 minutes. There aren't supposed to be any brick houses in the Russian village. There aren't supposed to be 2-story houses. Back to the cave. You don't need a chimney for your fire. This is our great plan for transforming the country. History has never seen the like of it. But the fate of the kulaks was not limited to them losing their property. Rather, as Solzhenitsyn notes, millions of them lost their lives in the process. After having their property confiscated, many were forcibly driven into the harsh Russian wilderness and left to fend for themselves. Solzhenitsyn describes an infamous incident in which 10,000 families, or approximately 60,000 people, were driven from their homes and forced to settle on marshland during the harsh Russian winter. No food or tools were left for them. The roads were impassable, and there was no way through to the world outside except for 2 brushwood paths. Machine gunners manned barriers on both paths and let no one through from the death camp. They started dying like flies. Desperate people came out to the barriers begging to be let through, and were shot on the spot. They died off, every one of them. There's no other way to build the new society. But for some kulaks, being driven into the wilderness turned out far better than having to live in Soviet society. For having been left in remote areas to die, they were freed from the dire conditions imposed on them by communist rule. It sometimes happened, Solzhenitsyn wrote, that they transported ex-kulaks out into the tundra or the taiga, let them loose, and forgot about them. Why keep count when you'd taken them there to die? Now that the mysteriously wise leaders had dismissed them, without horses, without plows, without fishing tackle, without guns, this hard-working and stubborn race of men, armed perhaps with a few axes and shovels, began the hopeless fight for life in conditions scarcely easier than in the Stone Age. And in defiance of the economic laws of socialism, some of the settlements not only survived, but became rich and vigorous. The things that could have been done with such people, if they had been allowed to live and develop freely. While the kulaks experienced a brutal fate, they were not alone in experiencing the destruction which accompanied the Soviets' attempt to transform Russia into a communist paradise. Rather, when all was said and done, tens of millions of people perished under communist rule, and Solzhenitsyn's first-hand experience of this made him acutely...
Yes, so we just want to repeat that when a system of lies is set up and persons are forced to live under the system of lies, unless you conform to the lie, you're going to pay a price.
And you have to conform both by your speech, your action, and by your very existence.
And
because if you don't speak, you say, I'll be quiet, I don't want any negativity. If you don't act, people say, do this, you do it. People say, do this, act, you do it. And then you are there. Your very existence may be contrary to the lie, and then your existence is a threat. And your existence has to go.
The fact is, you have to affirm the lie.
You have to affirm the lie.
You have to affirm.
You cannot simply remain quiet.
That's right. You have to affirm the lie by your action
and your speech.
And if you don't affirm it by your action and your speech,
you're in trouble.
You will pay the price.
You'll pay the price.
So the Kulaks in the Soviet Union, who were farmers, took care of the land, provided food, provided goods to the people, etc. They were doing something that was contrary to the lie that the Soviet state was. The lie the Soviet state was projecting on the people was that what the kulaks represent was bad. The better system was one in which the government owned everything and distributed what came out of production to everyone.
Equality to every man.
So because they represented truth that was contrary to the lie that the Soviets wanted,
they couldn't be allowed to exist.
They couldn't be allowed to exist. And they were sent out
the wilderness.
Into the wilderness. Now, Russia or the Soviet Union is an exceedingly cold country to the north.
Yeah.
And these people were sent out, they said, without their property, without their tools, except maybe a pickaxe and so on. So many of them would have died. In fact, Ukraine, for example, was part of the Soviet Union, and it is said that as many as about 5 million people died in Ukraine from starvation because of the attempts to set up this system whereby the government controlled everything. So millions of people died, and millions more continue to die in other places around the world.
And human life could not be taken into consideration for the lie.
No.
For the existence of the lie, for the promulgation of the lie, human lives were dispensable.
Yeah.
They were nothing.
And we just want to...
And even millions of human lives.
That's right. And in the context of communism, the lie was that
it is a better system.
It's a better system for the government or the state to control the means of production. But the same thing is happening with respect to the soft totalitarianism.
Because look at Dr. Makarov. This is a man who went to medical school, probably went to one of the good medical schools. I mean, when we as UWI graduates, we look to England. Because our mother medical school, the UK. And when many persons would register with the British Medical Council,
General Medical Council, the
and go there for postgraduate training. I myself went there to do transfusion medicine and so on. And so we look to that. And so he probably had good medical training. And the tool of his earning, like the farming tools of the Kulaks, the tool of his earning a living was his medical training. That's how he earned a living. That's how he got a living.
That's right.
And so this tribunal then that said his views were incompatible with human dignity, and that the fact that the statement, the assertion that people are made male and female could not be allowed to exist, along with the lie that male and female are of your own choosing. That's a lie.
That's a lie.
Male and female are of your own choosing as an individual. And so he said, no, you are made another, we are made one, we are the other.
And in fact, medicine is based on the fact that there is design and purpose in the universe. That's why we learn anatomy, physiology, etc.
And when they find a skeleton, the police find a skeleton, they'll call the forensic pathologist. The pathologist will say, based on the shape of the pelvis,
that's right,
based on the bones, the structure, the skeletal structure, this is a male skeleton.
Oh, that's right.
The fleshly male organs have gone, but the bone is left. But the forensic pathologist will still say, based on the skeleton, this is a skeleton of a male.
And if you got any genes,
if you look at the DNA, if you can harvest some DNA, you will say what I'm getting here is X, Y, and so this is a male. At XX, it's a female. So medicine, that is based on these standards, this reality,
has been contorted.
Has had to bow to the lie.
In fact, this doctor was fired because of the lie.
Because of the lie.
That is the essence of totalitarianism, where every thought must conform
to the lie.
To the lie.
Yes. And the essence of a dissident is one who refuses to conform in word or speech or thought or action. That's a dissident. And so David Makareth, as a dissident, he's a Christian dissident, he refused to conform. And just like the Kulaks, his tools of earning a living were taken from him.
That's right.
And he was sent into the wilderness to say, go, you cannot work anymore because of your beliefs.
There was a magistrate who said that the best environment for a child to grow up with a mother and father, of course,
that goes against the lie.
The present lie is that it doesn't matter. You can grow up with two fathers, two mothers,
or three
other kids. So these are the lies that you have to live by. Otherwise, you'll be fired. That magistrate was fired.
Exactly.
So that's the UK again. So the UK, let us not confuse matters or let us pull punches. The United Kingdom is a totalitarian state with respect to LGBT matters. It allows no dissident. If you say anything contrary to that, you would be. And not only that, there are lots of other issues that right now you cannot say things about, like in the universities, for example. If you were to say that evolution is not scientifically verified, you wouldn't get tenure.
Or you get out.
Or you'd be kicked out. So the question is now, why do ordinary people
cooperate with evil?
With punishing people who do not support a lie?
Yes.
So why would the people in the Soviet Union cooperate with a system that killed millions of people
for the sake of a lie?
For the sake of a lie that people are better off when the government control everything, which was patently not true. Why? Well, this video, Alexander Solzhenitsyn addresses
he speaks about that. And it's a critical question for us in our time. Because we have many ordinary persons who will cooperate with the evil of our day. And so why would an ordinary person, an ordinary teacher, an ordinary pastor, an ordinary parent, an ordinary policeman, an ordinary judge, why would they cooperate with a lie? Why would you do that? You would think people wouldn't do that.
And we're not speaking about people who are simply afraid to cooperate, but people who actively cooperate.
Who decide to cooperate.
So they actively and vigorously cooperate.
For example, in Russia, sometimes in the gulags, for example, there'd be people called traitors. And some of these traitors would be people your neighbor reports on you and said, I see this person doing some suspicious things over there, or, I think he's against the state, or just on that, they would come and pick you up. It's like in Nazi Germany, people would report on other people. And so, the KGB would just come and they would pick them up because your neighbor reported on you. And sometimes the neighbor would report on you as a way of saving themselves.
I think as part, one of the things that Solzhenitsyn said is that everybody was lying in the Soviet Union. This thing was built on a lie and everybody was lying. People were lying on their neighbors. Everybody was lying. Just lies.
Yes, and he was saying at the beginning, he was saying that the fog of lies was so thick.
You couldn't see a pillar.
You couldn't see a pillar through it.
It was just so thick. So this is, Solzhenitsyn considered the nature of evil and why
would ordinary
people
actively
participated in evil. And take a look at it.
Food for thought.
Nature of evil. In his reflections on evil in the Gulag Archipelago, Solzhenitsyn emphasized that all people are capable of evil, and that often evil is committed because those involved ignorantly believe themselves to be wholly and unmistakably on the side of good. Gradually it was disclosed to me, Solzhenitsyn wrote, that the line separating good and evil passes not through states, not between classes, not between political parties either, but right through every human heart, and through all human hearts. This line shifts. Inside us, it oscillates with the years. And even within hearts overwhelmed by evil, one small bridgehead of good is retained. And even in the best of all hearts, there remains an unuprooted small corner of evil. It is impossible to expel evil from the world in its entirety, but it is possible to constrict it within each person. Solzhenitsyn stressed that the reason many people are unaware that they are complicit in acts of evil doing is because dogmatic adherence to an ideology provides them with justifications and excuses for their actions. For example, adherence to the communist ideology, which promises a coming utopia by disallowing people to privately own the means of production, allows its adherents to mask evil actions in a false cloak of good. Or as Solzhenitsyn put it, ideology, that is what gives evil doing its long-sought justification, and gives the evil-doer the necessary steadfastness and determination. That is the social theory which helps to make his acts seem good instead of bad in his own and others' eyes, so that he won't hear reproaches and curses, but will receive praise and honors. Thanks to ideology, the 20th century was fated to experience evil doing on a scale calculated in the millions. This cannot be denied, nor passed over, nor suppressed. In addition to his interest in the nature of evil, Solzhenitsyn was also very concerned with discovering the best way to combat it. The conclusion he came to was that ultimately the greatest antidote to evil is truth. "Let your credo be this," he wrote. "Let the lie come into the world. Let it even triumph. But not through me." To live by this credo, it is essential for people not to shy away from raising their voices, even when others attempt to silence them. "We have to condemn publicly," he wrote, "the very idea that some people have the right to repress others. In keeping silent about evil, in burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it..."
So the question of why do ordinary people do evil things and become part of an evil system? And what Solzhenitsyn found is that in the Soviet Union, it was the ideology. The ideology was sold to the people using propaganda techniques that this is utopia. It's going to produce a economic utopia, a social utopia on earth. And people wanted to be a part of it. So anybody who was resisting the creation of that utopian society is evil. And as such, you must be taken out of the way. And we see the same thing unfolding in the soft. Well, people use the word soft totalitarian.
It is soft only because it's not imposed by an authoritarian political system.
Not yet. But I think they will start. This is where persecution and sending people to prison and so on will come about, because people have been sent to prison. So in the modern day political ideology that is totalitarian, all the various things, what's happening is that people have been sold an ideology that a society, a particular kind of society, a kinder, more compassionate society will be created. So people, if a transgender person wants to identify as the opposite sex, or even not the opposite sex, maybe something completely different, you are being compassionate. And therefore, being compassionate and showing love, anybody who resists that is a bigot, is a hater, and that person should be destroyed. And it so happens that the people who fall into that category are the people who hold the view that the external reality was designed and created with purpose by God, so that male is male and female is female, and anybody who thinks otherwise or in between has an abnormality, and as such they must be taken care of with compassion, but they are not normal. So we are seeing totalitarianism once again persecuting people who speak truth.
Yeah, but I think a term that was used by Dreher in his book, Live Not by Lies, is a myth of progress.
The myth of progress.
That people buy into the ideology because it is sold in the wrapping of the myth of progress, the march to progress, as he calls it. Yeah. In other words, this is how progress must be achieved.
It's achieved, yes.
And so those who don't buy in and don't follow and conform are actually against progress.
Yeah.
They are regressive.
That's right.
They want to take you back, they say, to the Middle Ages.
That's
That's
right.
what they say.
And they must be taken out of the way.
Yeah, and so it is okay then to do evil to those people.
Absolutely.
So you justify the evil by saying there are certain people to whom doing evil is justified because they themselves are against progress.
That's right.
They are retrogressive.
That's
they
right.
They are holding society back.
Yeah.
They are holding civilization back. They are cold and they are wicked, and so it is okay to do evil to them. It is important for us to understand that an important aspect is that they identify by propaganda a group of individuals to whom it is okay, it is justifiable.
In fact, it is necessary.
It is necessary.
Because they are standing in the way of progress. That's
exactly.
Right.
They're standing in the way of progress. And so this is one of the myths that was sold then,
Yeah.
and it is also sold now,
That's
that
right.
people like ourselves are standing in the way of progress.
Yes. But the point, to be made is that prior to the gay rights movement, men who had sex with men didn't have HIV. After the gay rights movement started in 1970s, by 1981, HIV was with us. And the world is 33 million people fewer because of the gay rights movement.
And hear what Dr. Mackerel said when he was being interviewed by the BBC about this. He said, it is not simply that I want to impose my own view on others. It is that I am holding to reality, to the truth. And also, he said, the view of transgenderism, it's a lifestyle that is harmful. It is not in the best interest of those who practice it.
No.
So he's saying, I'm doing two things. I'm holding out to the reality, to what is founded by reality, which is truth, in conformity with reality. That's the definition of truth.
Yeah.
He said, I'm holding on to truth, which is reality, and I'm also looking out for the best interest of those persons, because to make someone believe that they are a 6-foot man believe that he's a woman is not in that man's best interest. So we are not only holding out to a point of view, we are looking out, which is love, for the best interest of the other person.
The lie is always destructive. The sexual revolution is supposed to be what people must be liberated into. But the amount of disease, the destruction of the family, the economic cost of the sexual revolution for males and females, for children, has been a total disaster. In fact, in the UK itself, about 2 or 3 years ago, a paper was done on the cost to the economic cost to the British society for the destruction of family life brought about by the sexual revolution. So just as the Soviet experiment in communism was a disaster, the UK's experiment with the sexual revolution, including the destruction of the family, has been a disaster. Yet still, you find persons like the judge who upheld the decision against the doctor are following through. Why? Because they are sold into a lie, an ideological lie, that in people being free to do whatever they wish to do, you are creating progress. A better society and a progressive
That is the
society.
march to progress.
But Christ said that he came to testify to truth. What are some of the things that Alexander
Solzhenitsyn, who suffered for his being a dissident, for his refusal to live the lie, he suffered. And that's a point that we mustn't gloss over that, When you refuse to live by lies, you must expect that things will not be hunky-dory. You may well suffer for it. So Solzhenitsyn said, it's not simple. This thing of evil, people doing it, is not simple. He said, if only it were simple, so simple that there was a group of people easily identified as the evil people, and they live in a different place from the other people, and you could just destroy them in that place. He said, it's not as simple as that. He said, there is not a group of evil people, so-called insidiously doing all the evil deeds, which speaks to the ordinary citizen cooperating with evil, he was saying. And he's saying, just separating them from the rest of us is not enough. He's saying the line, which is the point we want to leave with, the line dividing good and evil is a line that cuts through the heart of every human being.
That's right.
This is something we all must realize, the nature of the heart of man. He says it cuts through the heart of every human being. And then he said, who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? Because in order to not live by the lie, we have to recognize our tendency to the lie in our own hearts and refuse that, reject that as well. And Solzhenitsyn also said, the greatest antidote to evil is truth.
It's true.
And I think that's a good point on which.
And Christ said to Pontius Pilate, I came to testify to truth. That's why we must testify to truth.
And refuse to live by the lie.
refuse to live by the lie. This has been the Issachar Hour. It's been good to be with you. And
thank you so much for joining us, and please remember to give us your feedback on the program, your questions, and your suggestions for future programs. Thank you so much for being with us today.